One word: pipeline. Some of you might not know what this term means. Let me just explain it to you really briefly. It is simply when a certain action or behavior leads to another action or behavior. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Xeno to Trails pipeline. These are two RPG series that are very well known among RPG enthusiasts. And there seems to be a very common trend where if you're a big fan of one, you end up being a fan of the other. So in this video, we're actually going to be exploring why that is the case. What are the similarities and differences between these two series? What makes them both so great and so appealing to almost always the same audience? Number 1, world building. So both of these series have a huge emphasis on world building, and they do it so much better than, I would say, a vast majority of other games, even other RPGs. So for example, Xenosaga has its own built-in encyclopedia, which helps a lot with all the fancy words they're always throwing at you. The Trails series has tons of in-game books. These are books that people in that actual universe will read and discuss with you. And in fact, these books can sometimes give you really insightful pieces of lore that end up pertaining to the actual story. In most of the Xenoblade games, we have this thing called the affinity chart, and it's this massive web of connections between all these different characters that you meet throughout the world. And to give one more example, in the Trails games, almost every NPC is named, and they almost always have their own like little subplot going on. Sometimes it even spans over multiple games. There are characters you can meet in the very first Trails game, and 10 games later, they're still around and they still are continuing their little subplot. So typically, when you play one series and you really enjoy that intricate world building, and you really need something to scratch that itch, moving on to the other series is definitely going to do it for you. Number 2, characters. So let's discuss a couple differences, because characters get handled pretty differently in both series. So the Xeno series often focuses more on psychological and mental health aspects of characters. Now, this does happen in the Trails games, but Trails is more focused on having realistic character dialogue and interactions between characters. All that being said, both of these series have a lot of memorable and impactful characters and character moments that make it really stick out among video games, and you know what? Even among things like books, movies, TV shows, there's a lot of really interesting characters that you're probably not going to find the equivalent of in anything else. So although they handle characters a little differently from each other, there's still a lot to love in both series. And number 3, it's all connected, always has been. Does everybody remember when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was at its absolute peak? Everyone would watch every movie leading up to, let's say, Infinity War and Endgame, and the viewers would be massively rewarded for sticking around and watching everything that led up to those movies. Well, imagine that, but even better. Remember, RPGs are very story focused, so it's not a good RPG without a good story. And both of these series have stories for days. Once again, the way these two series handle it is a little different from each other. For example, Trails usually has story arcs. You'll have the first arc, which is the Sky Trilogy. That's essentially one big story. And then you'll have the Crossbell Duology. And then you have the 4 Cold Steel games. So they're split into arcs, and all the arcs connect to each other. Whereas the Xeno games are almost always completely independent from each other. And by independent, I mean you could play them in any order. However, there will be a lot of references, reoccurring themes, and even direct ties to each other. This means that when you play all of them, especially in order, you are massively rewarded when you get further and further into the series. This is something that the Xeno games and the Trails games have in common. At first, it's really daunting because there's so many games in each series. In Japanese RPGs, they're often very long. But the payoff for both the Xeno games and the Trails games is so absolutely worth it. Even just playing one of these arcs or games by themselves is already a really great time, but it's significantly enhanced when you know all the nuances, you know all the references, and you know how everything ties together. So there you have it. Those are 3 reasons and a whole lot of examples why, if somebody is a fan of one series, they're almost always going to be a fan of the other series. Now, obviously, this is not 100%, but it happens very, very often. And when you actually play all these games, it becomes very apparent why, despite all the differences, these 2 series are beloved by usually the same people. And so that's going to actually be the end of this video. Thank you all for watching. If you like my voice or something, you can subscribe. I make a variety of content, so you're probably not going to see a video like this all the time. But yeah, I don't know if you like Xeno and Trails and other games, and I don't know, I'll make a video on all sorts of different subjects, so I don't know, check it out.